Once Upon a Time in Kona. Final Draft. Preface. I grew up in a time when stories were told by lantern light. There was no television and no electricity in our house, only the soft glow of a kerosene lamp and the voices of my elders carrying the past into the present. This book is a tribute to my maternal grandparents, Emily Alawa and Saburo Akahane. I once thought I would write a big sweeping novel about our family's history, but alas, I am no Michener. This is my first attempt at writing a story in more than 50 years. What you will read in these pages is creative nonfiction. I was not there to see these events happen. My grandfather Saburo died before I was born, and my grandmother Emily passed away in her sleep when I had just turned 7. We lived in a multi-generational home on the slopes of Holualoa, a small coffee town in Kona on the big island of Hawaii. My grandmother would sit with me and talk about her own childhood by the sea, how she moved up into the mountains when she married Saburo, and about the everyday life on the farm, the cookhouse, the bathhouse, the outhouse, and the hoshidana where we dried the coffee cherries. She showed me how to pound breadfruit into poi, and told me how the land itself could feed a family even in the hardest times. My grandparents grew up in a world shaped by deep Hawaiian and Japanese traditions, and their lives were strengthened by the interracial bonds they formed. As I got older, my mother Yuki kept those stories alive for me. Stories of laughter and hardship, of love and connection to the land. Listening to her, I realized something urgent. I am the last one in our family left alive who heard these accounts directly from the people who lived them. If I do not write them down now, they will disappear forever, like the trade winds that blow across the islands and are gone. I am writing this for my own children and grandchildren, and for their children after them. Through these pages, I hope to give them the voices, the dreams, and the lessons of their great-grandparents. I want them to know the home Emily and Saburo cherished, the love that held our family together, and about the family farm in Holualoa that was never to be sold. Michael, grandson. Chapter 1. Emily. The winding road from Kailua Bay climbed toward Emily's new home in Holualoa, nestled in the green folds of Hualalai Mountain. As she walked up the hill, Plumeria's sweetness rode the trade winds that swept through Iohiea trees, crossing from windward to leeward shores of Hawaii. The largest island in the chain, Imalia Molokai, existed only in memories now. The missionaries who had taken her in, Hanai they called it on the islands, renamed her Emily Alawa. She traced the letters in her mind, A-L-A-W-A. The Hawaiian word meant to glance with fear or to look over one's shoulder. Sometimes she wondered if her new family had chosen it, knowing how often she'd look back toward the home she'd left. Or perhaps the good Lord himself had whispered this name, marking the day her parents had given her away. Climbing higher along the Walalai Road, the parched golden-brown scrub gave way to verdant foliage that seemed to breathe with newfound life. From her vantage point, Emily gazed down at Kailua Bay, alive with maritime commerce. Fishing vessels slipped their moorings in the golden morning light, captains setting course for deep waters rich with ahi and Pacific blue marlin. Beyond the harbor mouth, inter-island steamers anchored in the deeper waters, their white hulls stark against the blue. Small tenders ferried passengers and goods between ship and shore. Along the shoreline, Paniolo in wide-brimmed hats whistled and called as they drove bellowing cattle down from the upcountry ranches. The animals' protests carried upward as they were corralled onto waiting transport ships. The white steeple of Mokuaikawa Church rose from the landscape like a finger pointing heavenward. Its stone walls caught the morning light across from Hulihe Palace's regal facade. Emily knew every corner of both buildings. Her father, David Kali, had once walked those hallways with the confidence of his Alieki bloodline, his royal ancestry evident in the proud set of his shoulders. Now those same shoulders bent beneath cargo loads at the docks, his heritage invisible beneath the sweat and strain of a longshoreman's labor. Emily felt the weight of isolation settle over her like a heavy shawl. Meanwhile, at the port of Honolulu, David, her father, strained under the weight of cargo being loaded onto waiting vessels, surrounded by the very family that had sent her away. Yet here she stayed on the Big Island, anchored by her own decision. Saburo. The memory of him guiding his rickshaw through Kailua's sun-baked roads remained vivid. She could picture the way his broad shoulders moved under fabric that had faded from Japanese brightness to Hawaiian practicality. Despite the dozen years between them, she had placed her future in his calloused hands, embracing the life before her rather than chasing the one that disappeared over the horizon. His past remained a mystery beyond his daily labors. Each evening, as the sun dipped toward Kona waters, Emily found herself sketching their future in her mind, a small wooden house with wide windows to catch the mountain breeze, children's laughter mingling with birdsong, and Saburo returning home to the patch of earth they would someday claim as their own in Honolulu. Chapter 2. Saburo. Sweat trickled down Saburo's neck as he leaned against his rickshaw. The wood still smelled fragrant from his own hands' labor. No one sold these things in Hawaii. He had crafted it himself, using skills inherited from his father back in Hiroshima, where he was born in 1876. This rickshaw was nothing like the ones his father made, but he had built this with his own hands, improvising with whatever parts he could scavenge. He was barely 20 when he came to Kona, but now he felt like a man, in charge of his own destiny. He had grown up in the shadow of Hiroshima Castle, its moats fed by the branching Oda River. His earliest memories coincided with Japan's transformation under Emperor Meiji, when samurai swords were being exchanged for Western suits and parliamentary procedures. His ancestors, the Akahaneshi, the Red Feather clan, once served as proud vassal warriors who pledged their loyalty to the ruling Hoshina family in what is now Nagano Prefecture. Their service ended when the samurai class was dissolved by the emperor, forcing them to abandon their martial heritage for whatever livelihood they could secure. His family were literally the last of the samurai. The family had relocated to Hiroshima's bustling port, where his father mastered rickshaw construction, those elegant two-wheeled carriages with folding canopies. Each was a testament to Japanese craftsmanship, perfectly balanced leaf springs, sturdy wooden spokes, and steel-rimmed wheels wrapped in rubber. Young Saburo absorbed every detail of his father's meticulous work. The workshop consumed the entire ground floor of their home, a cavernous space where his father's tools hung in perfect order. 2 half-finished rickshaws stood like patient horses. Wooden stairs ascended to the genkan, where outdoor shoes surrendered to house slippers. Beyond this threshold lay their modest living quarters, the central room for gathering, and to its right, his mother's kitchen domain, fragrant with miso and dashi. Evenings brought hushed meals punctuated only by formal pleasantries. Night rituals followed in the main tatami room. There his father would unfurl their bedding while his mother's voice filled the darkness with ancient tales of warrior ancestors. Her lullabies carried him to dreams of red-feathered samurai. On market days, his mother would press a woven basket into his small hands. Her instructions floated after him as he darted through Hiroshima's narrow streets. He'd linger by the mochi makers, mesmerized by their choreography, wooden mallets rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Skilled hands darted between thunderous blows to turn the glutinous mass. By dusk, fishermen's boats would glide home, their decks silvered with the day's bounty. He'd watch them unload mackerel, imagining the salt-grilled saba his mother might prepare, its skin crisping over coals, its flesh sweet against his tongue. These sensory treasures framed his boyhood world. Cholera claimed his father when Saburo was 10. His mother sustained them by selling homemade ramen and umeboshi-filled rice balls until she too succumbed to illness 6 years later. Orphaned but fiercely independent, Saburo refused his relatives' charity. Instead, he vowed to follow the path of many former samurai families. He looked eastward across the Pacific to another sun-bathed island chain, hoping for a fresh start. Thrust into the role of survivor, Saburo scraped by in the merchant districts. He apprenticed with other carpenters and hauled goods along the wharves. Hiroshima's port at Ujina was expanding, whispers of opportunity drifting in with the salt air, tales of distant lands where fortunes awaited the bold. Japan, hungry for resources and influence, eyed the world beyond its shores. Emigration agents roamed the streets, painting pictures of Hawaii's sugar plantations, endless fields under tropical suns, wages that could rebuild a life. For a boy like Saburo, now 16 in 1894, the pull was irresistible. The Meiji government had lifted bans on overseas travel. Thousands of young men were sailing west, fleeing poverty or seeking reinvention. With his parents' spirits urging him onward, perhaps in the form of a red feather glimpsed in a sunset, Saburo made his choice. He sold what little remained of the family workshop, gathered a few coins, and boarded a steamship bound for Honolulu. The voyage across the Pacific was a trial of endurance. Waves crashed like the uncertainties of his youth. Crowded decks teemed with fellow emigrants, their dialects a babel of hopes and fears. Saburo clutched a small bundle, a carpenter's chisel from his father, a faded kimono scrap from his mother, and the unyielding resolve of a red-feathered bird spreading its wings and rising into the unknown. Hawaii promised cane fields and community, but for Saburo it was more, a canvas to etch a new story, far from Hiroshima's delta shadows. As the Mike Maru steamer sliced through the ocean, he gazed at the horizon. He wondered if the winds of change that had upended his homeland might now carry him to heights unimagined. Chapter 3. A Father's Love. Emily took her time walking up the Walalai Road toward Holualoa. It was still early in the day. She had ample time to get back to the Alawa family home about 2 miles south of the palace before sunset. Though the Kali family had released her through Hanai adoption, her father had still bequeathed her a small 2-acre plot in the mountain town. The land was one of several parcels that came to the Kali family during the Great Mahil of 1848, when Kamehameha III redistributed properties once held exclusively by the Ali'i royalty. Her father's final words about the gift echoed in her mind. "This land stays with you and your children's children. Never sell what cannot be replaced." The words awakened something buried deep within her. From the depths of memory arose a vision, a calloused hand extending downward from above. Its skin was weathered, fingers gnarled yet powerful from decades of labor. Without thinking, she raised her own hand skyward, reaching for something blurred by the wetness gathering in her eyes. Emily's sense of direction had never depended on north, south, east, or west. Since childhood, her world was oriented by Mauka and Makai, mountain and ocean. These weren't just words, but physical pulls she felt in her body. The weight of Hualalai's volcanic presence loomed above, while the distant rhythm of surf called from below. For directions beyond the mountain-sea axis, islanders spoke of journeying Kona side or Kohala side. They named the district as a destination rather than using cardinal points. The place itself became the direction. Hanukkah beckoned from the northeast, Puna from the distant southeast. She finally stood at the edge of her inheritance, a plot on the Makai side of the government road that passed through Holualoa. The gentle slopes of Hualalai rose across the road on the Mauka side, climbing toward a peak where wild pigs made their home. Chest-high walls of ancient lava stone bordered the little plot of land on 3 sides, east, north, and west. Their surfaces were worn by wind and rain. A shorter stone wall divided the property from Mauka to Makai. To the left of the roadside entrance, a breadfruit tree cast dappled shade. To the right, a small plumeria tree blossomed, its fragrance like a natural Hawaiian perfume. A line of tea leaf plants, used for making skirts and wrapping lau-lau, taro leaves packed with meat and fish, lined the inside of the roadside wall. Extending out from the center of the north stone wall stood the Hail Emu, the cookhouse where her father's family had prepared meals. Its walls were made of the same stone that surrounded the property. Through its doorway, she glimpsed a screened safe holding tools used in Hawaiian cooking, a blackened pot worn smooth from use, several bowls carved from rich koa wood, and a stone poi pounder with imprints of countless hands. A small stack of firewood was heaped next to a fire pit filled with ashes. Overhead, a rusted corrugated tin roof covered the structure to keep the bright sun and daily rain at bay. An old bench and small table occupied one corner. A pakini, a metal wash basin, hung on a nail pounded into the crossbeam supporting the roof. An old water tank for catching rainwater stood to the left of the cookhouse, while 20 feet further lay a garden plot sheltered by papaya and rose apple trees. Rising above the Makai side wall stood a large mango tree that drew her gaze upward, its limbs bent under the weight of small fruit in various stages of ripening. Some fiery red, others still emerald green, many transitioning to sunset gold. Scattered across the ground lay mangoes that had surrendered to gravity in the absence of harvesting hands. Emily could almost taste the golden sweetness. A blanket of hanohono grass covered the land on the other side of the middle wall. Its green fingers stretched across the soil. For now, the ground cover seemed content to stay on the south side of the wall. But Emily knew it would soon climb over if not brought under control. The plant thrived in the volcanic soil of Kona's upper slopes. She remembered its slightly bitter taste from her younger days. In her mind's eye, Emily already saw it, a modest dwelling sitting in the northeast corner near the road. She would sleep on lahala mats woven from sun-dried pandanus leaves, their sweet grassy scent filling the simple space. The lanai would extend toward the road, just large enough for her poi board and stone. From there, she could nod to passers-by as she worked. The rhythmic thump of her pounder would keep time with the day while she hummed under the overhang that sheltered her from sun and sudden rain. She envisioned a bamboo-framed chicken coop behind the house, where speckled hens would nest at night, leaving warm brown eggs for her breakfast. Later, when children blessed her home, pigs would be raised for celebratory luas. Emily's chest swelled with something beyond words as she stood on the soil that had known her father's footsteps. Though raised in another family's embrace, she could feel ancestral threads weaving around her now, binding her to this patch of earth. She felt his love in this land he had entrusted to her. It was a gift that bound them together forever. a tangible reminder of his commitment and sacrifice. With each heartbeat, she longed to honor him, to draw closer to his spirit and the wisdom he had left behind. This was not just land. It was a promise she would guard fiercely, a symbol of her father's love that endured beyond separation, despite the ancient Hawaiian custom that had distanced them. Chapter 4. Stranger in a Strange Land. Saburo stepped off the gangplank of the Mike Maru onto the bustling wharf of Honolulu Harbor in the spring of 1896. His thin cotton kimono clung with sweat under the relentless sun. He was 18, slight of build, with calloused hands from his time on the docks in Ujina. The Pacific crossing had been long, rolling seas, cramped quarters shared with other laborers, and the constant stink of coal smoke and unwashed bodies. The odors clung to him like unwelcome memories, and every joint in his body ached for the deep embrace of steaming water, the kind found only in the wooden tubs of a traditional Japanese bathhouse. Standing on unfamiliar soil, thousands of miles from the cherry blossoms of Hiroshima, he found himself adrift in a strange silence. The journey complete, yet the destination still a mystery. A tattered rice bag containing the few remnants of his former existence rested by his ankles. These scant belongings would be the foundation of his fresh beginning. But Honolulu assaulted him. The air was filled with shouts in strange tongues: Hawaiian, English, Chinese, Portuguese. Horse-drawn carts rattled over dirt streets. Merchants hawked pineapples and poi from wooden stalls, and everywhere was the press of bodies. Chinese in queues, haole overseers in white linen, and clusters of Japanese men fresh from the plantations, their faces already lined with exhaustion. The sugar recruiters had met the ship, barking promises of contracts on Oahu or Maui, but Saburo felt the crowds closing in like a net too tight. He had no stomach for the regimented rows of cane, the luna's whip, or the promise of debt. He wanted open sky, salt wind, and the rhythm of waves, not a new master. He lingered near the docks for 2 days, sleeping in the shadow of crates. He traded a few coins from his small pouch for handfuls of rice and dried fish from a Chinese man. On the third morning, he overheard talk of inter-island steamers bound for the Big Island. Kona, they said, quiet, with good fishing in the bay and hills with coffee rising skyward. Fewer eyes watching. A deep-sea fishing boat, the Manu Kai, would sail that afternoon for Kona. Saburo bartered his last good shirt for passage, slipping aboard with nothing but a rolled tatami mat, the clothes he wore, and the wooden geta on his feet. The crossing was rougher than he expected. The boat pitched through channels where the wind funneled sharp. By late afternoon the next day, Kailua came into view, a scattering of thatched roofs along a crescent of rocky shore, the green hump of mountain behind, and the water so clear he could see schools of fish darting like silver arrows. No crowds here. A few canoes sat on the small beach near the old wharf. Hawaiian men in mallow loincloths hauled nets, while a missionary church of whitewashed coral stone stood near the wharf. Mokuaikawa, though he did not yet know its name. Smoke rose from cook fires, carrying the scent of roasting fish and taro. He stepped ashore with legs unsteady from the sea. The village was small, perhaps 200 souls, native Hawaiians, mostly a handful of haole merchants, and some Portuguese families farther up the slopes with pastures and a few heads of cattle. There were no other Japanese faces that first evening. Saburo walked the dirt path along the bay, stomach hollow, until he reached a cluster of shacks near the water. A middle-aged Hawaiian woman, broad-shouldered and kind-eyed, was scaling fish on a wooden board outside her home. She looked up, curious but not unkind. "Aloha," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. "You wen come from de boat?" Saburo bowed slightly, struggling with the little English he had picked up on the voyage. "Hi, from Japan, Honolulu, I fish." She studied him a moment, then nodded toward the pile of opalu and akule glittering in the late light. "You clean? Help, then eat." He knelt without hesitation, taking the knife she offered. His hands moved quickly, practiced from helping his mother, gutting and scaling with neat efficiency. The woman, her name was Nani, watched and then smiled. When the work was done, she scooped poi from a calabash and grilled fish over coals. They ate in silence at first, the only sounds the lap of waves and distant laughter from neighboring homes. That night, she let him sleep on her small lanai under the stars, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. In the morning, she introduced him to her husband, Kiela, a fisherman with a sturdy outrigger canoe. Kiela spoke no Japanese, but gestures sufficed. They paddled out together at dawn, Saburo learning the local names for currents and reefs, the way to read the moon for good opelu runs. He had brought no gear, but Kiela lent him a throw net, showing him the wrist flick to spread it wide. Days blurred into weeks. Saburo lived in a small lean-to behind Nani and Kiela's home, built from lauhala and driftwood. He rose before light to help launch the canoe, paddling into Kailua Bay, where the water deepened to a rich blue. He learned to spot schools of fish by the shimmer on the surface and to harvest opihi on the rocks when the tide was low. He traded fresh catch at the wharf for rice, salt, or cloth. What he did not eat or trade, he sold, small bundles of akule or week wrapped in ti leaves, to the occasional merchant or passing hale. Coins were few, but enough for basics. The sea provided, the land gave taro and sweet potato from shared gardens. Word spread slowly of the quiet Japanese boy who fished well and asked little. One Sunday, after the church bell rang from Mokuaikawa, a missionary, Reverend Samuel, a gaunt New Englander who had stayed long after the first companies, approached Saburo near the shore. The Reverend had learned a few words of Japanese from earlier arrivals on other islands. "O shigoto o sagashi desu ka? You seek work? God provides," he said, offering a pamphlet in simple English. "Room in mission house, learn Bible, English, help with chores." Saburo hesitated. He had no faith in foreign gods, but he understood the essentials: shelter, food, and a roof to keep out the rain. After a moment, he nodded. The mission house was modest, wood-framed with a tin roof, situated near the old church. He swept floors, carried water, and mended fences in exchange for simple meals: poi, fish, rice, and a slightly bitter green plant that grew on the upper slopes of the mountain, reminiscent of the bitter tsuyukuza greens his mother sometimes added to her soup. The locals called it honohono grass. By lantern light, he practiced English. The Reverend's wife taught him letters, and in turn he taught her children how to fish. He was no longer alone, not yet family, but accepted among men. He learned the rhythms of this new land, one day at a time. Kona was different from the treasured memories of his past. Yet, like Hiroshima, the sun sank slowly into the sea to the west, leaving behind a flash of green just before fading to a red glow reflected in the clouds of the night sky.